Hello there. Welcome to the Future Founders Fireside Chat podcast series, The Journey. This series features weekly discussions about virtual reality, emerging immersive technologies, and entrepreneurship from the 2018 Future Founders VR Fellowship, sponsored by the City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development and produced by SIXR. The purpose of this podcast is to learn about the journey that it takes folks to enter the world of VR technologies and entrepreneurship. We hope to create an engaging conversation around emerging technologies in Seattle. This is episode 11, featuring Forrest Key, co-founder and CEO of PIXVANA. In his words, "I like to build things that don't yet have antecedents, usually software and teams of cross-functional people. I'm particularly good at 1.0 stuff, creating the vision, getting other people on board, pivoting aggressively, and as always, driving to outcomes. My projects are oriented around the visual senses, things that when seen help people understand data and make decisions with more confidence." Forrest is interviewed by Future Founder VR fellow Hafsa at the Riveter in Capitol Hill. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
Okay, hi, my name is Hafsa, and I'll be interviewing you today. Can you tell us about yourself and a little bit of history?
A little bit of history about myself. Well, my name is Forrest Key, and you're talking to me because I'm the CEO and founder of a company called PIXVANA, which is a virtual reality startup here in Seattle, Washington. I think if I was describing myself professionally, I studied film and history in college about 30 years ago. And when I graduated from college, I started my career in the film industry. And I actually worked at Industrial Light and Magic, which was the visual effects company started by George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars. And that was really my passion and interest in film and technology, which is what I imagined I would do in my career. And at the time, computers weren't yet being used for doing filmmaking. Film was done entirely using light and chemicals and film itself. And visual effects for film were not done using computers yet. It was just at the beginning of using computers to do visual effects. So I graduated from college in 1993, and that was the year that Jurassic Park was made, which was one of the first films that had any kind of meaningful visual effects, the digital dinosaurs. So I was kind of very fortunate that my interest and my career kind of coincided with an inflection in kind of how technology was being used in computers and film. And essentially I've spent the next 30 years, my entire career, in some way or other working with computers and storytelling. So quite a bit of time at doing visual effects at ILM, and then later starting a software company, my first entrepreneurial experience, starting a software company to make tools for visual effects production. So I kind of made a software company that made technology for people like myself as a visual effects, computer graphics artist. And then from there I went and spent about a decade working on video streaming technologies for the web. I worked on a product called Flash, which was a plugin for browsers that was really important in the early days of rich media on the internet and websites that had video. And then I came to Seattle in 2003 to work at Microsoft on a similar technology called Silverlight. And these are now kind of obsolete. You don't see them on the internet anymore in 2018. But from 2002 to 2012 or so, about 99.9% of all the computers on the internet had Flash or Silverlight installed, and that's how people watch video on computers. And then what changed is when mobile phones came out, that all kind of got disrupted, and the way that the kind of video is delivered now, like on the phone you're holding in your hand, is increasingly done with standards, HTML5 and open standards, so there aren't dedicated plugins like Flash and Silverlight anymore. But in their time, they were very, very important. And then I did another startup that is a little bit different, was in the hotel space. So we made a company called Boutique that was based here in Seattle that helped hoteliers, the owners of hotels, to kind of build websites and social media presence for their hotel, so they could essentially tell the story of their small business to their guests. So I think of it as a storytelling platform as well, even though it's a little bit different. It wasn't, film and narrative stories. And then after that, more recently, PIXVANA. So that's a quick fly through of my 30 years of professional experience, but what it has in common is storytelling technology. That's really what I've been involved in repeatedly, and along the way I've started 4 software companies. PIXVANA is the most current one.
Great. Okay, thank you. That's inspiring. What inspired you to start your own business?
Well, I think, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I grew up with a entrepreneurial small business owner father. So my father did construction and had various businesses when I was a teenager and a younger adult. And so I saw it was very normal for somebody to have their own business and to take the risks of having their own business as opposed to going to a kind of a corporate safe job. So I think that really influenced me, because I don't think I ever would have imagined starting a company. My first company when I was 26, I don't think I would have imagined starting a company if I hadn't grown up around an entrepreneur father. I think for me personally, what's very rewarding about starting businesses is I really enjoy building things from scratch. So coming up with ideas, putting the team together, imagining the products, promoting those products to customers, going through the process of everything that's involved in kind of running a business. Those are things that I really enjoy. But fundamentally, I think the exposure to it as a teenager and seeing my father do it, I think without that, it would have been very hard to imagine taking the risk, because a lot of things in life you can only really imagine doing for yourself if you're inspired by a mentor or somebody that you see doing it, and that makes it possible for you to imagine doing it yourself. So I give my father most of the credit.
Great. What were some obstacles that you encountered along your journey?
Of being an entrepreneur in particular,
entrepreneur.
Wow. Well, I think getting a new business started, the number one obstacle is finding the right co-founders and team members. So putting a team together, finding the people you're going to work with, and having that team be a highly functioning team where you complement each other, and that, for example, someone brings certain skills to the group. Maybe someone's more technical and maybe is involved in writing the software. Somebody else may be more involved in marketing or sales. Somebody else might be stronger at kind of team building and managing and inspiring people. So the confluence of those different skills, getting that core group of people together, not just the founders, but the first maybe 5 or 6 employees, and getting that right, I think, is one of the most challenging aspects of starting a business and being an entrepreneur. While I mentioned already that I've started kind of 4 businesses as an entrepreneur, I actually attempted to start maybe 4 or 5 others that didn't get off the ground. And in all cases, it was because of problems finding the right mix of collaborators and founders. In some cases, I had found founders to do something, but then as we started to get going, we realized that we didn't have a good working relationship, or that there was different ambitions. At one point, I was working with a professor from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we were going to do an interesting startup with some technology that he had developed at his university. And right as we were about to get going in earnest, he decided he wanted to retire to Florida instead. So that was a pretty big difference of me wanting to start a business, him deciding he wanted to retire. So that's a simple example, but those are actually meaningful differences in kind of goals and ambitions. So if you and some classmates decide you want to start a business, I think it's really important to find out if you are compatible and have the same ambitions for the project and can commit to it for the same amount of time. If somebody says, I want to do this for 6 months and then I want to move to another part of the world, and you want to be in Seattle and you want to work on your startup idea for 4 or 5 years, then maybe it's not a good fit as a co-founder. So I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge that I've found in entrepreneurship, is aligning the team. Of course, there's lots and lots of other challenges related to fundraising and finding product market fit and finding a way to sell the product at scale, so that you have enough customers. There's lots of business problems. But as far as entrepreneurship, I think issues related to founders and to culture and getting people aligned culturally is probably the biggest challenge of entrepreneurship.
Okay. What kept you going in your journey?
Well, when you're a founder CEO, you take on a lot of a sense of responsibility and ownership to the team. And the team is not just yourself and your own ambition and desire, but if you have investors, it's a sense of wanting them to get money back and to make money because they trusted you with the money. If you have mentors that have spent time with you and have helped you to develop and to think about how you're going to grow as a person, you want to succeed for them and kind of return value back to them, because the mentor invests time in you. You want to show that mentor that their investment is a good investment. And then you have employees and colleagues that you work with, and you want them to feel that their time is worthwhile and that the effort and passion that they put into the project is rewarded. So I think when you're a founder CEO, one of the biggest responsibilities you take on is this desire to kind of create value for everybody, for the team, not just the investors, not just the employees, not just your mentors, your customers also, who you really care about. So you focus on kind of returning value to everybody. And that is what drives me personally. When I get up and go to work every day, I feel that I'm kind of accountable to the people that have trusted me with their time, with their money, with their use of my product, more so than personal agenda. So in that sense, I'm a little bit a kind of a socialist entrepreneur, and that I really feel that it's about the experience with a collective group, not so much about me and my vision and what I want to achieve in the world, and kind of manifesting my goals on everybody else. In fact, that's one of the reasons I didn't pursue a film career. So I studied film thinking that I wanted to be like a Hollywood film director. And what I realized very early in the first couple of years out of college is that film directors, generally, this is a little bit of a stereotype, are very, very good at projecting their egos. Because if you have an idea for an amazing film and you want everybody to get on board making your film, it's the word director even suggests it. It's like me, it's my idea. I'm going to tell you how to do the things that I want to see done. It's less of a collaborative project. My idea of business and entrepreneurship is it's more collaborative. So I didn't really like the film industry and the intensity of needing to project one's ego and having it be all about you. I think someone like James Cameron, I don't know if you know who that is, he's the director of Titanic. Have you seen the movie Titanic?
Yeah, I did see the movie.
So he's a very, very famous director, and that he's made many movies that have been very, very financially successful. And he's famous for just being an incredible a-hole, just very, very directive on the set. And he's screaming and yelling and telling people what to do. And, once you realize that leads to great films, you might excuse him as an artist and say, well, that's his process. On the other hand, if you have to work with him, you hate him because it's miserable. So I think of him as kind of emblematic of what a great film director can achieve through just the force of their personality. I don't think that is appropriate in entrepreneurship and business leadership. I think it's a much more collaborative, inclusive group exercise. So for me personally, what motivates me is the group dynamics. I think if I was more egomaniacal and driven, I might be a great film director. I'm not, so I'm not a film director.
Who helped you along your journey? Like, what communities were involved?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was very fortunate. I grew up in California, and I went to Palo Alto High School. And Palo Alto High School is at the center of the Silicon Valley. It's surrounded. All of my friends' parents worked in technology. So it was very easy for me to imagine starting a software company because it was all around me. Just like, easy to imagine being an entrepreneur because of my father. It was very easy to imagine being a tech entrepreneur because everyone I knew, everyone's family was in tech. So I think that first and foremost, Palo Alto inspired me and helped me. And there was many parents of my friends that actually were great mentors. One of my first really strong mentors was a guy named Dexter Dawes, who was my best friend's father. And I actually went to him for advice when I wanted to start my first software company and told him my idea and what I was thinking of doing and asked for advice. And not only did he give me advice, but he made an investment in the company, and he actually joined as effectively a full-time advisor, not full-time as in 40 hours a week, but several hours a week and very frequently was advising us. And he essentially worked with me for 3 years. And that was a little bit almost like me getting a business degree. And then I had this very experienced businessman who took an interest in my project and wanted to work with kind of young people in an interesting startup. He was at a point of his career where he was kind of retiring. So it was fun for him, fantastic for me, and in some ways kind of a replacement for a traditional business school degree. Like, I didn't go to business school, but I started a business and I ran a business. And I could have never done that without somebody like Dexter Dawes mentoring me. And he was probably one of 5 or 6 mentors at that time of my life. I had mentors that were really experienced in technology. When I worked at Industrial Light and Magic, one of the guys there is a guy named John Knoll. John Knoll and his brother Tom Knoll created Photoshop, the very famous product that's very, very, very well known now. At the time, it was really a tool for for making images for printing, because printing was the main way you use photography and images. Now it's a tool that's used for anything, right? For any kind of image editing, including virtual reality and film and things that you use on the web. So it's a very, very important technology product, and he and his brother wrote it and created it. So I was interested in creating a software company that made a software product, and I thought, well, John did it, I'll ask him for advice. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, I'm thinking of doing a software company. Could I buy you lunch and maybe you can give me some ideas? And he said, of course, I'd be happy to. And we went to lunch and we had like a nice 2-hour conversation. And I was not much older than you. I was 23 or 24 at the time, so very young, very inexperienced. But I had an interest in entrepreneurship and in software. And he was thrilled to speak with me and give me his kind of story and what he had done and tell me some anecdotes and give me some things to think about. And that led to a series of lunches. I probably had 5 or 6 lunches with John Wall. So an incredible mentor, somebody, couldn't ask for a better person to kind of give me advice about starting a software company. And there was others, but those are 2 examples of folks that I reached out to, asked if I could basically meet with them to learn about their experience. And that led to them being involved in really shaping my professional growth. So that made me capable of being a software entrepreneur, because you kind of need to learn from somewhere. There's a common refrain, which is you try to stand on the shoulder of giants, if you remember the expression, where rather than reinventing everything from scratch yourself, you kind of try to stand on top of somebody else's experience and learn from their perspective what they already know, so that you can then build on top of that. There's another great quote. Pablo Picasso said that good artists borrow, great artists steal, which sounds kind of silly, but hearing that from one of the greatest artists of all time, it kind of gives you confidence that the idea is, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you don't start at the beginning and try to reimagine everything from scratch. You go and talk to a lot of people, you listen to podcasts, you watch TED Talks, you go to conferences, you kind of gather from the community whatever you can, one-to-one mentors where possible, and then use that to build on top of, right? And that's how successively you get kind of more interesting and younger and more capable entrepreneurs. If everybody had to kind of figure everything out on their own, it would take a lifetime to learn how to do these things. So I was very fortunate. Palo Alto was an amazing, place to have grown up, and then the wealth of mentors that I was able to gain. And really just in each case, it was me going to people and saying, hey, I'm interested in starting a business. Could I buy you coffee and talk to you? I think young people sometimes don't realize how open people are in general to kind of meeting for coffee, especially in Seattle. Coffee is a very popular beverage, and chatting. I never say no when people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing a business. Could I buy you coffee?" I say, "Of course." Sometimes there's a scheduling problem. I might be busy. It might take 2 weeks to get scheduled, but I'm always interested in talking to young people and helping them in the same way that people talk to me. I always feel that passing that forward is really critical. So I think anyone looking to be an entrepreneur needs to think about where to go borrow and steal from, in terms of learning from others. It's not something you try to do on your own just by reading some books and, being in your bedroom. You really need to get out there and talk to other entrepreneurs.
Yep, that makes sense. Teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
So I did read that you were in the New York Times and that you raised about $6 million in like SID series.
Yeah, that was our first funding in late 2015. That's when we started PIXVANA.
Can you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, so in 2015, VR was a very hot and exciting new technology space. In the same way that today, in 2018, driverless cars, artificial intelligence, some other technologies are really the hot technology at the moment, that a lot of interest and excitement about how they're going to disrupt the near future, the next 3 to 5 years. So when you're in a market where there's a lot of excitement, there tends to be more people interested in working in those fields. There tends to be more interest in investors investing in those fields. So it makes it a little bit easier. You're kind of riding a wave of excitement. As opposed to, there's certain periods of time where something falls out of favor and is deemed to be not as exciting, and then you're kind of trying to crawl your way up a cliff, with winds in your face, and it's very, there's like a headwind. And then it's a lot harder to raise money. So in a neutral market, when you're raising money, it's the quality of the team, the ideas, the what you're building, how big of a market it is. These are some of the criteria that investors would consider. And then on top of that, you might have headwinds or tailwinds. You might have this excitement and buzz, or you might have like, oh, this is dead. It's never going to happen. One of my mentors here in Seattle told me a very interesting story. In 2003, there was a dot-com crash, and there was a lot of negativity about the internet in 2003, because in 1999 and 2000, there had been all this hype. So if you had gone off to start a company in 1999 related to the internet, it was incredibly easy to get money. Everyone was investing in internet companies. In 2003, it would have been almost impossible to raise money, even though the better time to raise money and to make money on the internet was probably 2003. So in 1999, if you raised money, the chances are you would have gone out of business, because there was this huge crash and a lot of loss of interest, and there wasn't a lot of economic activity. So a business from 1999 to 2003, almost impossible to be successful. But in 2003, it's almost impossible not to be successful, because from 2003 to 2007, there was an explosion in growth and excitement. Yet, the investors were very positive in 1999, very negative in 2003. In other words, just because investors think something's going to be good or bad doesn't mean anything, right? At the end of the day, the markets are going to be the ones that dictate whether you have a successful company or not. And sometimes raising money when there's not a lot of interest in the market can be hard, but it might be actually a good time to raise money. So my last company, my grandmother was devastated that I quit Microsoft in 2009 to start a company, because in 2009 there was a recession, there had been a housing bubble burst, and there was a lot of negativity about the economy. And I said, this is a great time to start a company, because the economy will come back and we'll be building the business. So I quit a safe job at Microsoft and started Boutique, which was the hotel marketing company. And that worked out great. 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, the economy was getting better and better and better. Our business grew, and we were very successful. So back to 2015 in VR. 2015 VR, there was a lot of interest in what could be possible with VR. And there was a lot of investment. And there were some really big deals, including Magic Leap, which is this AR headset that raised over $1 billion. 2016 and 17, the VCs, the venture capitalists, have been souring on VR, and there's been companies that have gone out of business, and kind of the energy has dropped off. So in 2018, if you were to go out and raise a seed round and try to raise $6 million as a seed round, which is what we did in 2015, it would be impossible. There's a lot of negativity about VR. However, the next couple of years are probably the years where VR as a business really takes off. So fundraising right now will be harder, but I think it's actually a better time as far as the prospects for the business. 2015, we got a great team together. We said we're going to go do this storytelling platform and video. And I went out and talked to a bunch of investors, and it was relatively easy to raise $6 million. Raising money is not succeeding or failing. It's just a step in then going and building a business. I was on a panel yesterday, and somebody said it's like having your kid go to college is from the time the baby's born to the time the kid goes to college, there's a lot of work. It's not like you have a baby and they go to college. There's all kinds of battles and opportunities and things that have to be done along the way. Starting a business, raising money is like having the baby. It doesn't mean anything. To get that kid to go to college, to have your baby grow up and be a successful business, there's a ton of work. So fundraising is an important first step, but really it's not the hard work. The hard work is building the team, building the product, finding the customers, delighting customers. So PIXVANA is 3 years old now. We actually, after that $6 million, continued to raise more money because we needed more to last this long. So we've raised $20 million. And in some ways, we're still just getting started. So just because we raised the money doesn't mean we've accomplished anything. We're just getting going, building a great business. And the next 2 or 3 years will be the really interesting ones.
Great. So is PIXVANA mostly focused on VR type of technology? What is it focused on?
Yeah, we call ourselves an XR company. And XR, in our case, we refer to it as extended reality, so augmented, virtual, mixed reality. Virtual reality is when you're in an opaque headset and the world around you is replaced completely by the virtual. Augmented reality, immersive, is when you're in a headset that is overlaying computer graphics into our world. So I see you and I see information overlaid around you. That would be like the Microsoft HoloLens headset. Mixed reality, what I call mixed reality, and different people use different terms, would be if we had projectors projecting images on the walls around us, And when I look at you, you look at me, we see around us maybe a fish tank and we're underwater. And that's because a projector is conveying information onto the walls in a way that makes us feel immersed. Those would be the three: AR, VR, MR, augmented, mixed, virtual, would be the immersive realities, in my opinion. There isn't really standard vocabulary for this. The other variation of that is whipping out a phone or a tablet and having the tablet or the phone's camera augment through the screen reality, or have a virtual reality where you're using your finger and a magic window and kind of moving things around on the screen, or the accelerometer where you do this. I don't think of that as XR. I think of that as a 2D screen version of XR, but not the same. But certainly the content that we build, any VR work that you've done, you can consume it on a phone, you can consume it in a headset, and the same piece of content works in both cases. So PIXVANA is focused on XR, all of the above. So our stuff, the things that we build, can run on an iPad with your finger, it can be in a headset, it could be an augmented reality headset where we're seeing reality but also graphics. We focused on virtual reality to start. That's what most of what we've done has been virtual reality, and in particular virtual reality photography. So cameras, video cameras, and things that can be synthesized by taking a camera and capturing it, as opposed to writing code or using a 3D modeling tool to design basically game engine content like you would see in a virtual computer graphics environment. We think that camera-based content creation is more approachable. You could go to your classmates in college and give everyone one of these cameras, like this little Samsung Gear camera, and everyone could go off and shoot 360 media and kind of make some 360 content. On the other hand, if you said, okay, here's a copy of Unity 3D, go write some code and build a 3D model, maybe a couple of your friends could do it, but not all of them. It's a scarcer set of skills. Everyone is comfortable with video cameras. We all have, you have a 4K video camera on your phone there. In fact, your phone's video camera, if we could go back in time 25 years to when I worked at Lucasfilm at Industrial Light and Magic, which was the premium, highest end, highest budget facility in the world, if we showed up with that phone would be the most powerful camera on planet Earth. And the fact that it can shoot 4K video at 30 frames per second, much higher resolution than anything that existed at the time. So 25 years of technology development, I mean, literally that would have been like absolute science fiction 25 years ago. And you have one, and most of your friends have one of those in your pocket. So we think that photography, like having the camera in your pocket, eventually be a tool you can use to create virtual reality. That's really what's going to make virtual reality very accessible and very interesting. We don't want it to be something that requires coding for our particular business.
It's very interesting on the camera because I'm not like really into coding, and I'm more into like fashion, and like I took video production in high school and like creating films and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to take a camera and like capture all 360 around you. Mm-hmm. So if you could advise yourself like 18 years, what would you tell yourself?
From a business perspective, there's lots of, when you ask me that question, the first thing that comes to mind is not business. It's being a father, being a brother, being a husband, being a friend. So my personal, I think as you age, at least for me, the wisdom of aging, I would apply first and foremost to the way my relationships with people. I think I've learned a lot about how to have positive, constructive, lasting relationships with people. And that matters in business too. Certainly, the skills that I've developed through lots and lots of trial and error relationships with people at work, I feel like I wish I could have learned those sooner, faster, and if I could impart that knowledge to the 18-year-old version of me, that would have in some ways reduced some friction in my life, to cut some corners. But that said, there's really not a lot of things that I think everything we go through, we learn the most from our failures and our mistakes and our challenges in life. So it's like these time travel movies where you go back in time and then you ruin everything when you try to change things. It's almost like giving yourself knowledge as an 18-year-old would rob the 18-year-old version of me of the opportunity to have learned through trial and error. And learning through trial and error is really what defines me and has made me who I am. And I like who I am, or I don't regret who I am. So I don't know that I would want to change anything. But if I did have the opportunity to change something, to impart some knowledge, I think fundamentally it would be about working with other people in
in a lower friction way, learning to collaborate and not judge as much and be more inclusive. I think those are things that I kind of developed those skills in my 20s and 30s, and I wish I had had them right away. Like, those would be great to give myself as a little gift. Let me ask you a counter question. So if the 48-year-old version of you could come back in time and give you some advice, like what areas, like if you could mentor yourself, what would you like to be mentored in by the wiser version of you?
I like to take advantages of the opportunities that I have, and like to not be focused on just school, and like to go around and see what kind of opportunities that I have, and to take advantage of the people that are around me, like the people in business. Anything like in Seattle is like really high on technology, and I'm interested in technology, so there's a lot of opportunities, especially me being a girl in technology. There's so much that I can do, so just to go around and ask for help and like take advantage of it.
So the 48, let's assume that you're going to be incredibly successful, and the 48-year-old version of you is going to be fully actualized and accomplished and successful. Like, what are some of those hopes and dreams you have for yourself? I'm curious. Like, what would you like to see happen in your career?
In 40 years?
30 years.
30 years. Hopefully someone who, like, even if I'm successful, still does something for my community, and I don't want to go out of my community. I want to do, even if I'm really successful, be still in my community and do something for my people. And yeah, like just to go back to my place, my origin, my home, and like to do something to just impact people in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that will happen here in the United States, your community here, or do you imagine that?
I think like to build my skills in the United States and to take my skills out of the United States to help people like in Africa, or like people that really need it with technology.
Do you have mentors? Because it's never too early to start. Do you have, if you could snap your fingers and have any mentor in the world, who would that be? Like, what kind of mentor would you like? Someone that you could speak to and give you advice?
Mentor. I don't know. Someone who like, I don't really know that many mentors, but like I think somebody who is in the apartment that I'm interested in, like in the industry that I'm interested in. And if that person couldn't like mentor me, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, well, if you can't imagine it, it's gonna be hard for it to happen. So if you can imagine it, then there's a chance it could happen. But if you don't imagine it, there's a very strong chance it won't happen. So I would encourage you to think about, who your ideal mentors would be. It could be an individual, somebody impossible. I don't know, Michelle Obama is. I wish Michelle Obama was my mentor. I don't know, maybe you'd like her as a mentor too. She inspires me. I don't know that'll ever happen. That I'll ever have the chance to have Michelle Obama be my mentor. But being able to give voice to that, to say that out loud, and to think about it, that might bring mentors like Michelle Obama, or some of those skills, or some of the things that inspire me about her, closer to my life. So I think it's important to, as a young person, to kind of imagine the kind of mentors you want to have and seek them out. And just like I did, John Knoll, at the time, if you had asked me before I met John, if you had said, what kind of mentor do you want to have, Forrest? I might have said, I'd like to have mentors that are software experience, that can give me advice about how to start software companies. And then if you had said, okay, if you could have any mentor, who would it be? I might have said John Knoll before I met him. And then it happened. And then I did meet John Knoll, because there wasn't anyone more successful or more interesting in the world than the guy that created Photoshop. So I would encourage you to think about the kind of mentors that you'd like to have in your life, and anyone listening to think about the mentors, and then to kind of pursue those relationships. Because back to the standing on the shoulders of giants, think about how much that can accelerate your potential and your opportunity if you can actually learn from people that have already done the things that you want to do.
Yeah. What do you have advice for the future founders of VR?
So VR is going to take some time. And my main advice to entrepreneurs, founders that want to start VR-related businesses, is to dream big, because someday VR will be a huge industry, and there'll be millions and millions and millions of headsets, and everyone will be using the technology. But on the path to get to that, there will be a lot of incremental steps of real value and use of VR for business value. For VR or any technology to be a consumer phenomenon, there needs to be hundreds of millions of devices. and there's a chicken and egg problem, the chicken or the egg, which comes first. If there aren't 100 million devices, then you can't build a business that's successful that requires 100 million devices. So how do you get 100 million devices sold? Well, consumers don't buy 100 million headsets unless there's some amazing technology that they want to use. So which comes first? There isn't amazing technology because there aren't people building it, because they're not building it because there isn't a market. There isn't a market because there isn't stuff built, and you have this problem. And this is really common with all new technologies. The iPhone that you're holding in 2007 when it shipped didn't, it was 2G only, so it was really slow. It didn't have an app store, so you couldn't download Uber, Instagram, or any of that stuff. All the iPhone had was a phone, a calendar, a basic email application. It was pretty lame. And when the iPhone shipped, if they hadn't sold a bunch of iPhones, then companies like Uber wouldn't have built applications like Uber. And then people like you wouldn't have bought a phone because it didn't have any of the cool apps. But something crystallized with the iPhone, and it really, boom, it happened. And you got this flywheel going, they call it. It's like this circular effect, virtuous cycle, where great apps, more people buy, so more developers build great apps and things take off. VR, that hasn't happened yet. VR, there aren't 100 million devices. There's just a couple million devices. So there's all the potential, and it will happen, I believe. VR will, eat the world. There'll be lots and lots and lots of VR in the next decade or 2 decades. But as an entrepreneur today, focusing on applications where VR can be used to solve real problems for businesses that can pay for VR, because there isn't yet a consumer market. So if you went off and said, okay, I'm going to make a application VR for teen girls who are going to, do their college application rehearsals in VR, as an example, just making it up. You could build that application, and it could be a great application, and it could have all kinds of techniques for young women to interview and practice eyesight and answering questions and feeling in the presence of a college admissions director. And nobody would use it because there's very few teen girls that have VR headsets. There's very few people that have VR headsets, period. And those that do maybe wouldn't buy that application. They'd want to use it for free, so you make no money. On the other hand, if you made an application to help construction workers certify certain electrical panel installations using VR, that might be a business that you could start today and sell, for $10,000 a seat. So on a continuum of incredible mass consumer phenomena and really not yet there, but focused on business, VR is more of a business process-oriented business today. And that's what PIXVANA has realized. We started off thinking about there's going to be this really big market in a couple of years, and it's a little bit too early for that. So we've shifted our attention increasingly towards businesses and helping businesses use VR, particularly for training, for training people in soft or hard skills. Soft skills would be like diversity, inclusion, awareness, or communication style, or empathy in a situation, watching something happen. Hard skills would be things like knowing where to put the deli meat so it doesn't rot, or how to stack cans on a shelf, or how to plug certain things into a panel. So we're really focused on helping companies train employees in soft or hard skills using VR as a medium. That's not a business with millions and millions and millions of users. There's tens of thousands of users, but those users will pay tens of thousands of dollars, so it's a viable business. That's kind of the state of the market today. So anyone thinking, I want to be a VR entrepreneur, I would say start in grounded business areas and dream big about consumer scenarios. But if you start with the consumer scenarios, you're going to probably be sorely disappointed because it's a little bit early. And that's what a lot of VR entrepreneurs, including here in Seattle, have found out, is that it's a little bit early for VR as a mass consumer phenomenon. That said, there's a movie you never saw. I doubt you've seen it unless you're a cinephile like me. There's a movie from the 1960s called The Graduate. You haven't seen The Graduate with a guy named Dustin Hoffman?
I did.
Did you?
Yeah.
There's a very famous scene early in the movie where he's just graduated from college and he's very uncertain about the future. He doesn't know what he's doing with his life. He's very anxious. There's all these adults talking and drinking alcohol, and he's kind of discombobulated. And one of his father's friends comes up to him and says, I have one word for you. He takes him aside to a private room and he says, I have one word for you, plastics. And basically, that's a mentor. This is his father's friend who wanted to give him advice and was telling him to go into plastics for his career. And plastics in the 1960s was probably a soon-to-be booming industry, right? There was a new technology. I think if somebody took you aside when you graduate from college in 3 years, if one of your parents' friends or a mentor takes you aside and says, VR. That's a similar advice. It's good advice. I think VR over your professional career of 30 years, well worth investing time and energy in potentially having a great lifelong career in the extended reality universe. But if somebody took you aside and said, in the next 12 months, VR, it's not a no-brainer. It's a risky, emerging technology early. You'd have to have kind of the confidence and fortitude to like stick it out for a longer period of time if you really want to succeed. It's not a gold rush. No one's making millions right away in VR. It's more of a 5, 10, 15, 20-year kind of investment horizon. So that would be my strong advice to any entrepreneur in VR is be measured and have a plan to be around for many, many years to really reap the riches.
Finally, the last question. How do people find you? Like your work, like a card or something?
Like to contact me?
Yeah.
So I am an introvert, so I don't go to a lot of events. I don't show up like the poor GeekWire guys. I love GeekWire, which is a really neat community, and I would encourage anyone interested in entrepreneurship and technology in Seattle to go to the GeekWire events. It's a great networking event. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people that work in technology. They invite me every time because I'm on their mailing list. I never go because I have 2 teenage sons, my wife. I like watching movies. I like reading the New York Times at night. So I'm an introvert. You'll rarely find me in public. And I recently deleted Facebook because I think Facebook has ruined democracy, and we could have another podcast about that. And I'm really concerned about kind of the addictive qualities of social media. I have teenage sons. I've seen like the addictive qualities of some of the things they do. So I'm basically not online in social media. I don't check LinkedIn. And I stopped using Twitter, and I'm off of Facebook, and I haven't deleted WhatsApp and Instagram because those are just too powerful, and I need those. But they're owned by Facebook, which makes me nervous. So I'm more of an analog world person. I'm a coffee taker in small groups and one-on-ones, and I respond to email. So emailing me is the best way to reach me if someone wanted to reach out to me. It's my first name, Forrest, Forest, at PIXVANA, which is spelled PIXVANA.com. And I'm not always immediately responsive, but generally when people reach out to me, especially younger people or people seeking entrepreneurship advice, I tend to engage and try to find time. I'm also in VR a lot. So if Rec Room, I play a lot of Rec Room, which is a social application, and as new VR applications come out, I'm spending time. I spend a couple hours a day playing around with VR because I think it's important to understand the medium. So that's a social environment where actually I do interact socially, but I tend to avoid large crowds and noisy rooms, so I'm not at a lot of events.
Great. I think I'll just open it for the audience. If you have questions.
Yeah, I'm just like watching the presentation that you put together as a team for getting that $16 million. Is that the $14 million? And this is quite impressive. You haven't had a chance to check it out.
Yeah,
check it out.
Yeah.
So you're actually using your product in the seeking more funding, and which is kind of impressive. That is like you practice what you preach.
Yeah. So when we raised our Series A, so our funding for PIXVANA, we did a $6 million Series seed, which was our first funding. And then about 2 years later, we raised what we called our Series A, which was a $14 million additional round of investing. The way we did that fundraising is we early on said, okay, the typical way you fundraise is you put together a PowerPoint presentation or something like PowerPoint, Keynote if you use a Mac. You go to meetings in rooms like this. There's a projector. You're talking to some investors, and you have slides, and you put up the PowerPoint slides as a kind of visual aid to tell your story. But you're telling your story. That's what fundraising is storytelling, and you're explaining the story of your vision of the market, what's going to happen in the market, why your business will be successful in the market, and critically why your team is a great team. It's really about team, market, timing are kind of the 3 main things. And PowerPoint, if you think about the empathy, if you're an investor, if I'm pitching you and I think about your job and what you do each week, what investors do each week is they take dozens of meetings with entrepreneurs like me that show up with PowerPoint. So the routine for you is you come into, sometimes you go to coffee and have a casual chat, but eventually it culminates with a PowerPoint presentation. So for you, it's this PowerPoint presentation, PowerPoint presentation, PowerPoint presentation. It gets very mundane and repetitive. And within that, you're looking at the pattern of the PowerPoint presentation. And probably in the first 5 or 6 minutes of a presentation, you're making a decision about the entrepreneur, whether you think they're compelling or not, if you buy their vision, if you like the idea. And then the next 45 or 50 minutes of the meeting is almost like not even necessary. In some ways, those first 4 or 5 minutes is when they make a decision about you. So what we considered, we said, look, we can do a PowerPoint presentation. I've done a lot of fundraising with PowerPoint. I know how to do it. But what we're really selling people on, trying to get them excited about, is VR. So why not put them in VR so that when they come into the meeting, I say, okay, here you go. You're in VR. Watch this presentation. And it's a 15-minute film. And there was risk to doing that because, first of all, there was some risk that the technology wouldn't cooperate. Sometimes there's little hiccups. So you have a meeting where everything is riding on a 15-minute film and it doesn't work. Well, now the meeting's ruined, right? You don't have a fallback to go to PowerPoint. That was one concern. Another concern is like, well, some people may not like it or find it uncompelling, or we might try to do a presentation in VR and it may not be any good. And now we spent all this time and money and energy to create this presentation and it's not effective. No one had done it before. So the fear was that maybe we would learn, like back to the standing on the shoulders of giants, we didn't have the benefit of standing on somebody else's shoulders to see if it worked. So we were going to be experimenting and pioneering. And if it, we didn't want to be the great pioneers that failed. We wanted it to be successful. So there was a lot of reasons why maybe it was a mistake to do it. But we decided, we're like, look, if we believe that VR is going to be this amazing storytelling platform and telling a story of a company that's wants to raise money, is a kind of story that you would tell in VR. Let's just go for it. Let's commit to doing it. Let's do it well. Let's go out there and put 100 investors in the VR headset and let's see what happens. And actually, it's a great question. I'd forgotten we had done that. I haven't thought about that in a while. And it was a really good thing to have done. I think it worked. The film was good. The story that we told was good. It was a compelling way to use the medium to immerse you. For me as the fundraiser, it was fantastic because I went to meeting after meeting, put people in the headset, and then I just got to sit there and read on my iPhone and multitask and literally I would just hang out. In fact, I kind of secretly took pictures of everyone in VR. So I had this hilarious slide that I showed my colleagues at work when I would come back on Fridays. I'd say, here's who I presented to this week. And it was like dozens of photos of people in VR watching the film. And I was sometimes with me as a selfie, just smiling, going like that. So it was really, for me, it kind of put me in control. Instead of me being like the person they were whipping with questions, I was kind of saying, okay, you're interested in PIXVANA, here, put this on, watch it. And I got to sit there. And then they come out of the headset. They were just like, whoa, that was different. I've never seen that before. And it kind of broke them out of their pattern of like them asking questions, them thinking about how they wanted to manage the meeting and how they were forming an opinion of me. So the good news is it was a good film. It was effective. It worked. And then we raised money. The bad news, because it was disruptive and innovative, and so that anyone listening can stand on my shoulders and learn from this, is that in some ways, doing something that disruptive discombobulates you, the VC, because you have a process that you follow. You go to, like I said, 5, 10, 15 meetings a week where you just hear pitches, and you develop a technique in your brain of how you assess the business. And I've taken all those tools away from you because you don't get to use your process anymore. I'm forcing you to use my process. And I think that was very risky to do, and in some cases did not work. I think there were some investors that maybe we would have had interest from that they enjoyed the presentation, that thought it was interesting, but it was so radically different that it kind of messed them up a bit and maybe confused their ability to assess and take an interest in the business. So I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. Nor do I even know that I would do it again in the future for our business. Certainly no regrets. What we did worked. It was fun. We learned a lot from it. But if I was raising a Series B in the future, I don't know that we would do it in VR, just because sometimes it's better just to fall into the pattern of how other people are used to and expected to make a decision on their own. And it's a tension. You kind of want to be innovative and you want to push boundaries, but you don't want to make it impossible. Like I personally, when I applied to business school, I didn't go, but I remember writing essays that were a little bit too disruptive. And I think sometimes you just want to fit into the pattern. Like, this is how it's done. This is the way you apply. If you do it completely differently, it can be successful or a failure. In fact, the inspiration to do it was that when I was in high school, there was an example of a college essay where someone had drawn a comic book strip instead of an essay, right? And the first person to do that, when that got to Harvard, it was someone that applied to Harvard and they got in. Harvard saw it for the first time and said, wow, cool, and they let the person in. But the second, third, fifth person to do it, they might be like, oh, another comic book, right? They didn't follow directions. The directions were to write an essay. So it's a risk that you take when you break out of the pattern. And, it's boring to write a college essay like every single other college essay, but that's also kind of what the college essay reader is expecting, and, you have to balance those two.
That's so awesome question. So my other question will be Sophia. So that was what you're inspired, some of this logo that you have in there. But then also you mentioned about the business side. So you're not completely abandoning this art and film, just to apply it differently toward the business side, right? And then you basically using that tool that you have to raise funding, and it's successful. That could be your way to tell the other business hey, we did it ourselves. So is that pretty much how you sell your products to market?
So at this point, over the course of this year, we've just determined that the market for art, theater, cinema, entertainment is too early. There is not a commercial market. So we are not fully supporting that industry anymore. I just had somebody in New York who has a retail store, like a location-based entertainment VR arcade, that contacted me and said, we want to use your software. And I said, unfortunately, we're not supporting your category of user anymore. Film festivals, film mashups, kind of some of the stuff that you've done, Booty, very expensive for us to support, and there aren't any people with money to spend. It's a lot of what I would call, it's just a very early market. It's what I would call the VR curious as opposed to the VR ready. VR ready are people that have projects that have commercial outcomes. They have money, budgets, business reasons to proceed. VR curious are people that are like, wow, this is really interesting. Someday I'm going to do this. I want to learn now because someday I'll do it. And the challenge for a startup is we want to support that community because someday that's going to be the market. But to the extent that we support that community and it subsumes us and it costs us a fortune to support and tons of customer support and time and energy, and there's no revenue, then it will take us down to the bottom of the ocean where we'll drown. So it's been a tension for us this year. We've really wanted to support the kind of storytelling community and filmmakers and people that someday will be filmmakers, but there's no money in it. It's just too early. So we've been struggling with how to make the software available for free to the community, with at the same time turning all of our attention from a customer success and customer support perspective to businesses that have business projects. And we're still in that journey of figuring out that balance. We have built a software that's great for storytelling that can be used by students, it can be used by university programs, it can be used by artists. But we have to find a way to allow those users to have access without the support costs. And the support costs are pretty meaningful. People want to talk to us, they want demos, they want there's bugs and things that come up. They want supported, and so we've had to kind of find a balance on a little slider between broad access, free, and really turning our attention to businesses.
That's awesome. Thank you. One more, I guess, thinking about CEO. My opinion about CEO is they're the main seller, salesperson of the company, right? And when you approach a company that's wanting to buy your product, what would you tell what's PIXVANA about, for example? What is your elevator pitch or whatever?
Yeah, the PIXVANA pitch is that VR is an incredible medium to change the way people think and behave. So I've never been. What's your home country? Where are you from? Somalia. So I love Somali food. I know some Somalis. I've never been to Somalia. I don't really understand Somali culture. VR, I could see a documentary film about Somali. I could read a Wikipedia article. I know a little bit about the history of Somalia. But if there was a 5 to 10 minute piece that you shot when you go back home next time and take a film, a VR film of your community, your friends, going to a family event, just the airport for that matter, or some of the streets, and put that together in a film. If I watch that film, it's going to convey to me a sense of presence and give me a sense of empathy for kind of virtually being in Somalia in a way that no other medium can in history, in my opinion. And that's what's so exciting about VR, is that it can transmit this sense of presence and empathy and really change the way I think and behave. And thinking and behaving, back to training, if I can use VR to train somebody to behave or feel different things, that can be very powerful for businesses. For storytelling, it can be very powerful too. It's just that there isn't yet an economic model around documentaries or entertainment films. So I think the medium will be used eventually, fundamentally, to tell human stories, human empathy stories. But the business of that is kind of still a little bit early. One of the main films that inspired me to start the company was, there was a couple. There was a film that was made about a refugee camp in Syria, I believe. This is in 2015. And then there was a film that the New York Times made about a political rally in Iowa, in the Iowa caucuses in the presidential campaign. And both of those films made me feel something profound, even though the image quality wasn't very good. I was using Google Cardboard. It wasn't super immersive. But even in its raw, primitive state, I can see the potential to really make me feel something. And in the case of the Iowa caucuses, I'm staunchly not a supporter of President Trump, but I was at a Trump rally in the headset, and it was very different to be at a Trump rally surrounded by other Americans that I could see, women with children, veterans, different people, different walks of life, and I could see them as human, and I had empathy for them in a way that seeing a Trump rally on CNN in a rectangle hanging on the wall never made me feel empathy. It was very easy to go, oh, that's Fox News, those are idiots, get out of here, they're bad people. Very different to be in VR with those people. And then it's like, oh, these are human beings, they have a different opinion than me, but they're fellow Americans, they also have wants and needs, and for whatever reason they have different opinions than I do about politics. Very much more empathetic, very much less judgmental. It's the better version of me that I'd like to be, and VR helped me to feel that. Whereas rectilinear video or little YouTube videos or Facebook videos, back to Facebook ruining democracy, really cause the opposite effect of not seeing people as human beings and, thinking of migrants at the border as invaders and all that crap. I don't think that you could ever think of migrants at the border as anything other than, women and children and men that are seeking a better future for themselves if you saw them in VR. It's impossible to see people in VR and not have empathy. So I think people that call VR like an empathy machine, I think that's an appropriate term for the medium. And the real potential fundamentally is to communicate and convey human experience. And I think storytelling, including narrative and documentary and other kinds of art projects will be very, very powerful. It's just not a great business right now because there aren't enough people out there. One thing we haven't touched on that usually comes up in these kind of conversations about entrepreneurship, and your question, Booty, alludes a little bit to this in terms of the medium, is diversity. And let me mention that because I think that's a hugely important thing about entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship, I was just reading an article in the New York Times today about two women film critics talking about their favorite films of the year. And there was a story earlier this week that talked about what women learned about themselves, about the woman experience, by looking at Hollywood films. And it's kind of, sarcastic and critical of kind of how women have been depicted in cinema and some of the false narratives that it produces. And it's because it's a white male-dominated medium. And if you go back to the 1920s, it wasn't. In the 1920s, according to this article today, there was a lot more women participation in writing and creating films. And then something happened in Hollywood and it became this male-dominated medium. Diversity in startups and in storytelling and this new technology is a powerful tool for not only like righteousness, and it's a philosophically better thing for the world to do, it's also a better thing to like win. Like if you're starting a business and you have a diverse team, you're going to have more perspectives, more insights, more skills, and you're going to crush your competition. So in like a avarice-driven, make money way, diverse teams are better than non-diverse teams. VR, to the extent that it has a diverse set of entrepreneurs and voices, including younger and older people, women and men, different races, different ethnic backgrounds, different language skills, different abilities, all those things make for stronger entrepreneurial teams. And it's our hope, and I think everybody's hope working in the industry, that VR will be a more inclusive medium with more voices that will be heard. So PIXVANA is very diverse. We really focus on diversity and inclusiveness in our own culture. We want VR to be that way. And I think entrepreneurship in general, in Seattle in particular, is moving towards more having a more diverse community. Obviously, our city government and our investors in town are all on the vanguard of being much more progressive and thinking about inclusivity and participation. There's some recent venture capital funds that have started off that are women focused or minority focused. We're at the Riveter right now having this conversation, which is a woman forward co-working space that has, I think, about 70% women entrepreneurs as their members. So I think VR, hopefully will not repeat. I think it's a really interesting media opportunity to not repeat kind of the pattern of the 1920s into the 30s where Hollywood became so white male dominant. Back to this article that I just read this morning. And you yourself, as a woman of color, I think it's a really exciting new voice to add to entrepreneurship in the community. And I think your perspective and what you will bring to entrepreneurship is something that'll make your entrepreneurial efforts more diverse and therefore more apt to be successful. I think that diversity equals success, and diverse teams win. Not only they win, they crush their non-diverse competition. So I think that one of my requirements, I do some angel investing. I only invest in diverse entrepreneurial teams. Jonathan Spazzato, who's the founder of GeekWire, has talked about this too. He only invests money in teams that are diverse. So if 3 white guys show up, they went to Harvard and say, hey, we're starting a business, that on paper looks like it's attractive because they went to Harvard. Actually, that's much less interesting and much less likely to succeed than a diverse founding team with more experience and perspective, because that really does come into play very quickly in starting a business, because you can relate to your customers better, you can think about problems out of the box. You're not locked into the very traditional male-driven kind of entrepreneurial culture. So that's something I think it's really fundamental in our community in Seattle, on the West Coast in general, in tech entrepreneurship globally. These are, it's a very progressive segment of the economy, and certainly in Seattle, it's a big factor.
Wow, that's inspiring. Thank you so much for touching this subject.
Well, that is SIXR's mission, is diversity and inclusion.
Yeah,
they're predominant.
Bringing emerging technology to the underrepresented communities where they can get a voice.
I'm a big believer, and both because I am kind of a progressive liberal socialist, but also because I think it leads to more money and more success and crushing the competition. So it's not just a kind of righteousness thing. It's actually a formula for success to have more diverse voices.
Does it make business sense?
Mm-hmm. And I think, wise investors and people that back businesses understand that. And you see in the West Coast more and more diversity in founding teams.
But also, I just finished a 2-year term on the board of Women in Film, and a huge part of my mission while I was on there was to bring more alternative storytellers to make understand this. That's another part of the disruption of the industry, to understand, wow, there's this whole new frontier happening for storytellers, and but also obviously woman forward, wanting to see, and it's very exciting to see the percentage of women in VR is already just so noticeably more welcoming than even the film community here, which is also pretty much better than almost anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a teenage son who wants to go to film school. He's a junior at Roosevelt High School. And we went to visit NYU and USC film programs, and those film programs are 50 or 55% women, and the kind of the future is very much a more balanced community. But historically, the film industry has been a disaster, and I think that's changing. We actually at PIXVANA, if you come to our office, we have our conference rooms named after film directors that inspire us, and we chose as a reminder for diversity and inclusion to only have women and people of color as our inspiration. So our conference rooms are named after a more diverse set of storytellers, and it's a great reminder. And when we sit down and Apple TV join the screen, you have to kind of look at the name of the filmmaker, and it's Akira Kurosawa, Jordan Peele, Sofia Coppola, those kind of diverse voices. And in fact, Sofia as you mentioned, the fundraising video, we called that video Sophia after Sofia Coppola, who's a great filmmaker, someone that inspires us. And our conference room is named after her film about Marie Antoinette. What's that film called? But it's so that's our main conference room. So we kind of every day we have to like log into the Sofia Coppola conference room.
That's super awesome.
Love it.
Yeah. So one last question from me, and Diana might have, but like you kind of predict that in 2020 VR gonna boom. That's always like that's the case with the people who are in the industry. Like, oh, next year is gonna be the VR year. Would that mean with Oculus Go, Oculus Quest? Like the price drops and like not required to have like a computer that can drive. Would that contribute to what your prediction is?
No. If you ask me today, when is VR going to be a consumer phenomenon? Yeah. I would give you a very different date now than I would have 3 years ago. I think a consumer phenomenon, 100 million devices, I don't think will happen in the next 5 years. I think VR is going to take longer to get going. In the same way that the cell phone did. The cell phone, everyone remembers 2007, the iPhone, because that's when it really took off and it led to 1 billion smartphone devices pretty quickly. But everyone forgets that from like 1997 to 2007, there was phones and smartphones, and there was a product called the Palm Trio, which I had, which was like an early smartphone with a little chiclet keyboard, and it had a web browser, not really, and it was crap. In retrospect, it wasn't really the thing. We thought it was the thing, but the thing actually came later. I think the thing in VR that really takes off, where you have 100 million headsets, will be much lighter, higher quality, cheaper, etc. So we're not quite there. I think the Oculus Go is not the thing that's going to sell 100 million units, and the Quest isn't either. The Quest is a great device. I've used it. It's super cool. It's a new Oculus headset that has external cameras, so it's a standalone device. There's no cables. You can use your hands and move them around. It's only $400, so it's a really neat device, and it will be really great for VR, and we're really excited to have that product in the market. It's expected in the spring of 2019, but that's not going to sell 100 million units. That's just another step in the way. So I think that the VR market, it's great that we have the Oculus Go, which is $199, great product for $199. The Quest, $399, great product. The Rift and future Rift versions, great product. You'll have HoloLens 2.0 next year, which is an AR device. So there's a lot of really good systems out there. But what's missing is it's not just the hardware. There needs to be killer applications, and that's going to take longer. I think that's what the industry underestimated, is finding these like amazing apps that 100 million people want to use, where you want to go home and spend time with VR every day instead of on your phone and TikTok or whatever you're using. Do you use TikTok?
No.
I just read about TikTok the other day. It's a hot new app on iPhones. I think it's going to take some more time. So I think back to entrepreneurship and VR. Back to the plastics thing. It's a great time for you to start your career. You're still in college. You got 3 years to go. So you graduate in 3 years, and then spend 4 or 5 years kind of getting started, and then kind of 2027. It's going to be a phenomenal industry. So your timing is perfect. It's a little bit like my timing getting out of college and starting in the film industry. For me, as a 50-year-old entrepreneur, 3 years into a company that's raised $20 million, we can't wait 7 years for this to take off. We have to make a business now, and the business now is very much in kind of helping businesses use VR to change hearts and minds. That's often training, sales and marketing, medical applications, therapeutic applications. Those are applications that make a lot of sense today. So I think for your community, inspiring, bringing voices in, getting people trained in the medium, that's a great thing to be doing now. But if you all tomorrow said we're going to start businesses creating filmed entertainment content for this huge audience, you would all be waiting around a long time for that to materialize. So it's a measured investment that we all have to make as a VR community.
Awesome.
That's great.
That's about it. Thank you so much for being here today and taking the time to do the podcast.
Great pleasure. Nice to meet you. I look forward to seeing what you do, and count on me if you need a mentor when you're getting out of college, and give me a ring and we'll have coffee. You won't see me at the GeekWire event, but we'll have coffee. And you should go to the GeekWire events, and your community should, because the GeekWire events are a great place to go and be inspired. They're a fantastic local resource. I'm really, really proud of what GeekWire brings to our community. It's just personally not my thing.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe and give us a rating or comment if you enjoyed this content. This episode was brought to you by the City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development and SIXR. Mixed and mastered by Joshua Duchesne. Please check the show notes for more information. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, we hope we've inspired you to keep exploring your own journey.